We now delve straight into the second segment as we look at the latest developments in the nation's external reserves base. Now, reactions continue to pour in following the upwards-downward pendulum swing, of course, of the nation's external reserves. Nigeria's external reserves fell by $337 million in the first 2 weeks of this month, maintaining its declining trend since the middle of last month. Data from the Central Bank of Nigeria shows that the external reserves fell to $38.882 billion last week, Thursday, from $39.219 billion as at the end of July 2022. This indicates that the external reserves has lost $563 million since July 18th, when it commenced the latest downward trend. Prior to July 18th, the external reserves had maintained a 40-day upward trend, rising by $976 million to $39.445 billion from $38.421 billion on June 6th. Buoyed by the rise in price of crude oil, which accounts for over 80% of the nation's foreign exchange earnings so far this year, the fears of external reserves reaching $30 billion benchmark has been kept at bay. However, the lurking sentiment requires much more to be done in expanding the nation's economic buffers and explore non-oil exports as foreign exchange earners, aside to the current intervention from the CBN, such as the RT200 initiative and the Naira for Dollar, which have boosted the diaspora remittance base recorded so far. Mr. Abiodun Kayode Ali is a tax manager and economist with PricewaterhouseCoopers, is live in the studio. Thank you so much for your time, and let's dig down with this. What is really responsible for this? Can I call it flip-flop? It's been up and down, just like we always talk about the capital market. At times it's up, sometimes it's down. But this is what's been playing out with our reserves. Tell us, what's responsible for this?
Okay, thank you for having me, Tolu, first of all. And like you rightly said, sometimes you see it go down, sometimes you see it go up.
Yeah.
What I think is actually responsible for that is simply most of it can be tied to or linked to the CBN's intervention package. If you consider in recent times, you've seen situations whereby the rate at which the Naira is being traded, is being exchanged for the dollar in the parallel market, it's shot up to something above 700, and you've seen the CBN, you've seen it come down to something around 650, 670 currently. So what the central bank is simply trying to do is just trying to ensure that there is that exchange rate stability, which is one of its core mandates. Then in addition to that, sometimes when you see the increase, it could come as a result of some of the monies that is being channeled by multilateral institutions like the World Bank, the IMF. So some of these monies, some of these inflows are things that you are seeing. And also sometimes it could be as a result of sales, non-oil exports as well as oil exports. Then also I think one important thing we should also consider is that some of Nigeria's debts, right, some of the Eurobonds that were issued actually matured in recent times. So really these are some of the things I think are responsible for that. But overall, one thing you would have noticed is that you keep seeing the current balance hovering around that 39 billion, 38 billion. So that's what it's been doing over time, right from January at the beginning of this year till now. So I don't think it's any much of a concern, really.
Because we can still meet our imports, all right, for the particular months. Correct. Because I even read through and saw what is happening in Egypt, how many months they can import, I think about 5 months. And what we have here is almost 12 months looking at. That looks good. But let's look at the Naira for Dollar initiative, RT200, all of this. Do you think they're really impacting positively on our reserves?
Laudable projects introduced by the central bank, I think sometime in 2020, right? And it was actually necessary because of the dwindling reserves at that point in time. Do I think that they're actually making a lot of, are they hitting the mark? Well, to a reasonable extent, based on the reports that has been given by the central bank at different stakeholders forum, it has clearly said that I think the central bank tried to state that prior to that program, I think the inflows, the Naira for Dollar was actually the 65 Naira that was being given for every dollar that is being channeled by the diaspora remittance into the Nigerian economy through the official channels, right? So if you consider what the CBN governor actually said, he said that prior to that particular point in time, I think he said that we're getting something within the range of, I think, about 6 million either per day or per week but he says currently now we're seeing something around the range of 100 million. Looking at his statement and judging by what he said, it seems to a reasonable extent that that does make sense, right? Then if you also look at, that's the individual side of it. If you also look at the corporate side of it, right, and that's when the initiative of the RT200 was introduced sometime in February. What we've seen at the recent biannual export summit, which was also organized by the CBN, was that the CBN governor was stating there that in the first half of the year, about $2 billion has come in, and that's the highest that's coming from non-oil exports in a very long time. So looking at those two statements, it does seem that, yes, it is reasonable. We can say that inflows have come in, but you might want to ask yourself, $2 billion, it's a bit low. Nigeria has a potential to do much more, especially if all the factors that are needed to actually ensure that production is at full capacity. I think Nigeria can do way more than that, right? So to a reasonable extent, you can give that kudos to the CBN, but I think the Nigerian government needs to work in hand with the CBN and make things better, right, for non-oil exports to actually generate a lot more than that. I believe we have the potential to do much more than that, and I think the government needs to work hand in hand with the central bank. Currently.
Well, uncertainty around any economy will also make investors move. Of course, they'll put their money where they know that there is security and where it's, of course, safe, and they can make profit. And, of course, repatriate monies back to their country. Portfolio investors moving away from emerging markets like Nigeria, does it also affect this one way or the other?
Yes, it does. It does, right? And ever since the Russia-Ukraine war, the impact simply was that commodity prices were soaring, right? And most of these developed nations needing to control inflation, right? Which UK just recently released its own. It's about 10.1%, which is extremely high.
Yeah. Since 1982, I guess.
Exactly, about 40-year high, right?
Wow.
That's what we're talking about now. So looking at most of these policies that were taken into consideration by most of these developed economies, definitely portfolio investments were running over to those advanced nations where they could earn higher returns and the risk was low. And if you also consider some of the measures, some of the policies that is being taken by developing nations such as Nigeria, some of the CBN's policies, such as the capital controls, right, which is actually affecting the ease or is restricting the flow of foreign exchange. These are some worrying concerns that is actually causing foreign portfolio investment to decline. Although foreign portfolio investment had actually been on the decline right from the time of the COVID-19 pandemic, right, when it came, right, and it still continues to be on the decline. However, the foreign portfolio investment still represents 60% of Nigeria's capital importation, right? And I think recently the figures that we had for Q1 was somewhere around the range of 1.5 billion, even though it's dropped compared to Q1 of the prior year, right, of 2021. Even though it's dropped, I think it was 1.7 billion in 2021 Q1. In 2022 Q1, based on the report issued by the National Bureau of Statistics, it's somewhere within the range of $1.5 billion. And the interesting thing is that it's always in Q1 that you have the highest inflow of foreign portfolio investment. Okay. So probably it's going to be on the decline by the time the capital importation figures for Q2 comes up. Yes, I quite agree. Most investors are actually not interested as a result of this capital control and also as a result of uncertainty, like you rightly said. And especially when you want to consider that we're in a pre-election year, we don't know what policies might actually come into place. We don't know if the current policies that will sustain, will continue. So a lot of these concerns are things that foreign portfolio investors will definitely be looking at before they decide whether they want to invest in this economy or not. So like you rightly said, yes, it is a cause of concern.
Let's talk a bit about non-oil, which you mentioned. I think that is the way to go. Now, a lot needs to be done to take advantage of this sector to be able to add up to what we have in our reserves. Are we doing enough? Well, that should be on one side. We're also not doing so very well with crude oil, which would have been getting more at the moment. Vandalism and oil theft is what we go through as a country. How do we strike a balance with all of these challenges?
It's
a serious one.
I sometimes worry and I don't understand it, but it's unfortunate. It's where we find ourselves.
Honestly.
So let me just quickly take an analogy of Angola, right? Angola recently became the largest oil producer, right, in Africa. And if you consider, it has actually improved the Kwanzu, which is the Angolan currency, national currency. And I begin to wonder, why was it at this particular point in time? Why was it at this point in time when prices were going above $100 per barrel that we had this massive crude oil theft? I mean, prior to the COVID era, I mean, in 2018, 2019, we had our productions averaging 2 million barrels per day. How shocking it now came that we're now 1. doing
1.3
low, extremely low, especially during these times, right? And if you look at it, we should have had lots of dollars actually sitting in our excess crude account, but that's not the case. And the interesting thing, yet the same, is that this same crude oil that you made reference to actually represents about 80% and a little more than 80% of our foreign exchange earnings, which is quite sad. With respect to the other points that you made mention of, with respect to the non-oil exports, I think Nigeria has a lot more to do in those regards. I was looking at the figures from the National Bureau of Statistics, still the foreign statistics report for Q1 2022, and I was amazed, right? If you consider that crude oil, 79%, it represents 79% of the total value of our exports, right? If you take out crude oil, if you take out natural gas, about 9%, you are left with things like cocoa, representing just 1%. That's the next largest exports that we have. Cocoa representing 1%. We have things like sesame seed representing 0.9%, right? Figures that are actually very low, right? So are we doing enough? I don't think so. I think we can do more. I think a lot needs to be done with respect to, if it's not even agriculture we want to focus on, what about solid minerals? We have a lot of them in abundance. Nigeria is a blessed nation. There are other nations who don't have these resources that we have, and they are doing quite well. I think it all has to do with economic management, and I think it has to do with government getting serious to do business and putting its foot on the ground, simply. If you consider this, we always mention insecurity, right? If you consider the case of insecurity affecting farmers, right, getting to the farm, harvesting their products, sending it across, then if you also consider infrastructure is actually quite critical for the development of any nation. If any nation is going to achieve optimal production capacity, you need to consider such critical infrastructure, such as road and railway. Our road and railway system, I think it's terrible, to the extent whereby by the time you see most of these products being moved from where they are being sourced down to the ports, right, there is a lot of wastage that takes place. You also want to look at our storage infrastructure. So a lot of issues that we need to address. I don't think we're actually at full capacity, and that's why you see a lot of manufacturers actually complaining that even the FX that they need to get the inputs which they need to produce this output, they are not getting it. You see a situation whereby they are competing, right? They are competing with people who are going into non-productive activities. We're in a pre-election year. Very soon you see politicians also competing with manufacturers to gain access to FX. So these are some of the issues that we're seeing. And I think the CBN is actually doing a lot in this regard.
I think at the point many think they are overwhelmed.
That's quite true. I think it does need assistance from the ministries, right? Most of these ministries, like the Ministry of Agriculture and so on and so forth. I think it actually needs assistance.
But finally, Russia and Ukraine crisis, hiking commodity prices, and we'll continue to import. Our bills will continue to rise. So this will also, one way or the other, hit our reserves.
That's quite true. And I think one of the good news is that currently, well, probably it's not a good news, but like you rightly said, even the oil. Do you know the interesting thing? The oil is currently trading at below $100.
Yeah, it is.
Right. I think I looked at it before coming here. I think Brent was trading somewhere within the range of 90, and the West Texas Intermediate was trading somewhere within the range of 80. So it now begs the question: have we lost that golden opportunity? Well, I really can't say, but like you rightly said, Nigeria is actually a very import-dependent country. We consume a lot, which is quite worrying. So what I think the government should focus on doing is to ensure that most of our consumptions, we need to change that pattern to ensure that we consume things that are produced locally rather than going for things that are produced abroad. There is this illustration I just want to quickly share. I was recently at a retail supermarket wanting to get Ribena, and I was told, I saw two covers, a brown and a red, and I was told, which one do I want? Is it British or is it Nigerian? And I never knew that we had British and Nigerian Ribena, right? So as a patriotic citizen, definitely I would go for the Nigerian, right? So I think we need to do a lot when it comes to our consumption, right? recently, I know there was this complaint about Nigerians talking about Nigeria providing cars to Niger, right? And some people were even pointing out that even those cars were cars that were manufactured by outsiders, right? You're talking of Toyota when we have our own locally made cars like the likes of Innoson. So I think we need to expand that made in Nigeria, going for Nigerian products. The same way you would see the Anambra State governor, right? Who is always going for locally produced cars. Yeah. So I think that's the way to go. It's a valid concern. Definitely, it seems like if we're not careful, the results can actually decline further. So we all need to put our hands on deck at this point in time.
Beautiful conversation as usual there. Economics and tax manager, PricewaterhouseCoopers, they have been speaking to Mr. Abiodun Kayode, making real sense of issues around our reserves. Do enjoy the rest of the day. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.